Hello everybody, welcome back to the Young Fan Podcast. Today we're going to be delving deep into what has been one of the most competitive, tight and unpredictable League One campaigns we've seen in such a long time. Of course, we're only 16 games into this campaign, but already we can take so much from it. I'm going to take you over to this screen here, and it does look a little bit complicated. Don't worry, I'll be breaking it down in just a second. This website is called The Analyst. It's actually a website that I saw on the channel of James Lawrence Alcott. He talked about it on his podcast a few weeks ago, and I was absolutely intrigued by it. Of course, you can look at other leagues where it covers all of the top leagues across the world, and it does do League One as well. So I thought, let's break it down. Let's see what we can find. And I won't lie to you, I actually went to record this episode of the podcast last week, but I found I was sort of struggling to really get the real content from it. And I'm not going to force a podcast episode out for no reason. If I don't think it's of a good enough quality and I don't think it's good enough, I'm not just going to force a podcast out for absolutely no reason. So I did a bit more research, broke it down a little bit more, tried to gather more information from it, not just take the data, but also put it into actual real game scenarios and things that have happened, we can visually see on the pitch, and then we can sort of, back it up with the data that we've looked at as well. Now, I'm going to promise to make it as interesting as possible, and I promise you there are some really interesting, things to take away from this episode. And I'm the same as you. I probably would be the same as you. Sometimes I struggle to really understand it and to sort of take in what is looking like quite a complicated amount of information. But don't worry, I'm going to break it down. Now, I promise you, I promise, I really hope you're going to learn something about your League One team, because I won't lie to you, I watched every Oxford United game, I've watched every Oxford game this season, and I learned a lot from just looking at this data, explaining it, and I guess really sort of breaking down and finding the truth behind what has been, like I said, one of the most unpredictable, sort of off-the-wall League One campaigns we've seen in such a long time. Everyone's beating everyone. Let's break it down. Let's really see what we can find from this data and from the analyst. So, as you can see on the screen, it's a little bit complicated, don't worry. I'll be breaking it down. But this is basically XG. Now, the definition of XG, I can hit on the I button here, you can really get a definition of XG. It's very, very simple. It's a little bit wordy on here, but don't worry. I'll break it down and make it a little bit easier for everybody involved. Expected goals measures or XG, if you like, I will be referring it as XG, measures the quality of a shot based on several variables such as assist type, shot angle, and distance from goal. Whether it's a headed shot and whether it's defined as a big chance, adding up a player or team's expecting goals gives an indication of how many players or team should have scored on average, given the shots that they have taken. It's almost big chances created, but big chances created that down to XG should have hit the back of the net. I look at it as big chances created, but looking at it in different ways, and looking at it in terms of they do have several variables, like I said, shot angle, assist type, and distance from goal. You can also see there the other things will be taken into consideration. Set play, they're going to count as corners, direct free kicks, indirect free kicks, and throw-ins. Very self-explanatory. They're pretty much all the set plays in football. And the set plays to total is a ratio, the proportion of a team's total XG that resulted from set plays. A ratio, a proportion, whatever you want to look at it. That is what that all means. Again, a little bit complicated. Stay with me. I haven't lost you, hopefully. I haven't lost you just yet. But this is going to hopefully make it a little bit easier, because I have just sat down. I've typed it out. I've got a few notes here as well. I probably won't be able to see it. There's a lot of wording, and I'm going to try and break it down as best as I possibly can. So, let's have a look at it. I'm going to see who has got the best XG in League One this season. You can see it. It's Oxford United. Oxford are in a really promising place. They're sixth from the League One table. But we can take so much from it. Like I said, expected goals, it comes down to, they should have scored the most amount of goals. Expected goals, that we should have scored the most amount of goals. I can tell you really quickly, we haven't. But we'll come on to that in just a second. Really, going forward, Oxford United look really, really good. We've got an XG, like I said, there of 19.7. You see our goals next to it is 19 as well. So we're being very, very clinical. And that's a fantastic place to be. You want to be very, very clinical. If you're clinical, you're scoring your chances, you're scoring your XG. It's a really, really nice place to be. It proves we're taking those chances. We're in the league, and a nice place in the league for a reason, because we're taking the opportunity that we are being given. We're very lucky that we've got really, really creative players at Oxford United. We've also got a striker who's scoring a lot of goals this season in Matty Taylor. He has scored for Oxford United for the last few years, quite a few goals as well. But this season, he's still taking his chance. He's still hitting the back of that from the chance we're creating. That's a really nice place to be. It's good for everybody. Any team as well, but specifically Oxford are down to XG and goals the best at doing that this season. I'm trying to look at the notes as well, so I do apologise. In terms of set plays as well, we will look at set plays and set plays goals as well. So our set plays XG isn't very good. We're quite low down. We've only actually scored 2 set play goals. We should have scored around 3.2. The set plays were not as good, and that going forward offensively is probably one of our downfalls. But in open play, our XG is looking really, really good. Our goals are also backing that up and suggesting we're very, very clinical. It's a really nice place to be at Oxford United. We'll come on to defensive stats in a minute. This is expected goals for. Probably should have mentioned that. This is expected goals for. We'll come on to defensive stats, expected goals against in just a few minutes. So we're also going to look at Rotherham as well, because they're second in the table. What can we see from that? So they've got an XG of 19.6, just a little bit lower than Oxford by literally 0.1, and they've got two actual goals less as well of 17. And not as clinical as Oxford United, but you can see over there with the set plays, that's where they're getting their goals as well. They've got 11 set play goals. They've actually scored the most amount of goals from set plays, I believe, in the league, joint with Fleetwood. Their set play XG of 11 to their set play goals is exactly the same as well. So that's very, very good. They're creating a lot of set play opportunities and they're scoring every single one of them. They're extremely clinical from set plays. That's why Rotherham are looking really, really good this season going forward. Interesting, like I've already mentioned as well, they've actually got the same as Fleetwood, who are much lower down in the League One table, but it proves they're a real danger from set plays as well. Now, I also want to look at the current league leaders. It'd be unfair not to. Let's have a look at Wigan. They have got an XG of quite, not low, but it's lower than Oxford United, Rotherham, like I said, Plymouth, Sunderland and Charlton as well, of 16.7. But they've got actual goals of 23, which means they are really hitting the back of the net. And like I said, they're hitting the back of the net more than they should be, really, down to XG. They're really scoring a lot of goals this season. I believe they got the second most goals in the league, just behind Ipswich on 23. It's a great place to be. They might not be creating as many chances or as many expected goals as the other teams in the league. However, they're really, really hitting the back of the net, and that'll probably be a reason why they are top of the league. That'll be a big factor why they are where they are, because they're not just creating a decent amount of chances, they're also scoring more than they should be as well. So they're being more clinical, even more clinical than being very, very clinical. If that's physically possible, they are being able to do that. We will be looking at, again, in a second, I've got also my notes as well, I'm talking about goals against, but like I said, we'll come on to that in just a second. Some different points of interest as well. We've looked at sort of Oxford, Rotherham, and also the league leaders, Wigan, but I also want to look at different things that I sort of looked at. I'm not going to go through all 24 teams, we'll be here for absolutely years, but I do want to look at some different points of interest as well, especially Ipswich Town. Let's have a look at Ipswich. So their XG suggests it's not it's similar to Wigan, just below Wigan. But you can see they've scored the most amount of goals in the league as well. But they start a little bit slowly, but they're also creating a good amount of chances this season. And they've got the most amount of goals out of every League One club as well. They're 10 higher than their XG, which is a fantastic place to be. 10 more goals than they are expected to be scoring. They do actually have a fairly low amount of shots taken so far this season as well. We look at their shots; it's not that high. You can see them quite down at 125 shots as well. You can also see as well they might not be as many shots. They got the most amount of goals. Again, that proves how clinical they are being in front of goal. They're very, very lucky. We won't be looking at players too much this season, but I can tell you here by looking at players, they've got the second highest sort of best and most clinical strikers behind Freddie Ladapo at Rotherham. You can see Bon at Ipswich. That'll be a reason why they're doing so well and so clinical in front of goal, because he's hitting the back of the net and being very, very clinical. We're not going to be looking at players today. We may do one in the future if there's something you want to see a little bit more often, but that's just to back my point up there. The shots are 125 isn't many, but they've got the most amount of goals in the league. That must prove they're being very, very clinical in front of goal. They've got a very, very clinical striker in Bon. Now, I do want to look at defensive stats as well. I don't want to sort of drag on this too much. This is sort of, again, I hope I'm still with you. I hope you're learning a lot about your team. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all 24 teams. We'll be here for absolutely years. But you can see by looking at your club as well. And if you want to see me go into a bit more detail about this, let me know in the comments down below. Leave it a like. And yeah, I'll do this again, maybe looking at some more clubs as well. I looked at them sort of the main points of interest and some significant things that sort of popped out to me when doing this research. The next thing I want to look at, though, is Charlton, because they haven't had the best of starts of the season at all. You can see their position. They're currently 18th in the League One table and haven't started the season in the way that they would have hoped for. They are looking a little bit better now. Of course, they've sacked their manager. In Adkins, they are sort of slowly picking points up here and there. They're sort of clawing their way at the League One table as we speak. But I've got to be honest, down to XG, they're 5th. Like you said, they're not bad at all. You can see they are 18th, but they're in a really, really nice position at XG, which means they're creating those chances. It's the goals, isn't it? They've got an XG of 17.3. They've only got goals of 12, which, like I said, we click on goals. they're quite low down in there. They are on the sort of bottom half of the table based on goals, which suggesting to me, and looking at that data, it's pretty clear they're not very clinical at all. Unlike Ipswich, unlike Rotherham, we've already spoken about, and Oxford, they're not taking those chances. That XG is far more different than they would have wanted to. There's too much of a difference between their XG and their actual goals. They're not being clinical enough, and that's where they are in the league table. Like I said, if they got an XG of 17, they score 17 goals, they'd be in a really nice position. They'd be around that sort of, they'd be around the Wycombe area, the Rotherham area they've already spoken about as well. But they're not, because they're not taking those chances. It's a worrying perspective. And then, like I said, when I'm not just doing this research for no reason, saying this for no reason. How can we bring this into an actual scenario on the pitch, and what can we visually see? Well, if I'm the new manager that comes in, and I'm a manager that's just come into Charlton and highlighting those issues, what can I see that needs to be sorted out as quickly as possible? Well, it's a nice promise. It's better that you're creating chances and not scoring them. It's worrying if you're not even creating chances. What needs to happen? What needs to be done to improve Charlton right now? Well, taking those chances. It sounds stupid, it sounds obvious, but at the moment they're not. They're creating the chances, they're not hitting the back of the net. That's going to be something the new manager at Charlton will need to look at, and will also want to resolve as quickly as possible, because as soon as you start taking those chances, you can see how high they'll fly up the League One table. We will be looking at the defensive stats in a minute though, because expected goals against is again a massive reason why they haven't been. A lot of teams maybe aren't been as successful as they would have wanted to be. Again, I'm a little bit stop and start because I want to look down and make sure I'm getting everything from it. So I do apologise for that as well. Now, I think this is the point where we're going to look at defensive stats. We're going to look at those expected goals against. Shots against, XG against, and actual goals that are being conceded as well. And also that'll be obviously set piece shots, set piece chances, set piece XG, and actual set piece goals that are being conceded. And we're going to stick on the sort of Charlton train, if you like, because I want to look at the XG there. That's a little bit worrying. This is the team that, Crewe are in a really, really poor position. You can see that in a minute. We'll come on to Crewe in a minute. I do want to touch on that and what is going wrong at Crewe. There's many different things going on wrong at Crewe, but that highlights quite a lot as well. That XG there of 20.8 expected goals against. They've actually conceded 19. Again, that's very, very worrying. But I want to look at Charlton again here, as it's sort of sticking on the Charlton theme. They were expected to concede 15 goals. They've actually conceded 18. That's again worrying. That can you can see a lot. You can take a lot from that, and we won't go through every possible scenario you can take from it, but you can take a lot from it. Like number one being that they're being either very, very sloppy defensively, although they haven't got a great XG against either, but they're conceding even more than their XG. That's very, very worrying. We look at order of how many conceded, who has conceded the most amount of goals. Charlton are worryingly quite high on that list, and that'll be again something that needs to be resolved as well. And again, if I'm the manager coming into Charlton, I can see we're not taking those chances, and we're also being very fairly sloppy defensively as well. We've got an XG conceded which isn't great as it is, but we're also conceding more than that. That's an even more of a worrying point from a Charlton perspective. That defence needs to be definitely looked at. And they definitely need to improve on that absolutely massively and crucially as well, because that could turn into a massive issue. I want to look at the season as well. Of course, the question across the Charlton fan base is what can save the season? What needs to be improved, as we've already mentioned there as well. Well, by looking at the stats, it sounds a little bit stupid. The chances are there and they need to be taken. Defensively, they need to shore that up. And so that difference between their expected goals against and their actual goals conceded needs to be much tighter and lowered as well. More importantly, they need to see that being lowered as quickly as possible, or else you're going to get yourself in a really worrying position as a football club. I do want to mention Wycombe as well, because their stats are really, really interesting. Although they're fourth in the league with XG, we go back to their expected goals for XG. They're not, they're quite low. They're very, very low, and although they are fourth in the league, they're not very high with XG. They're not creating a lot of chances. But you can see there, their actual goals is very, very nice. They're at 17. Again, they're being even more the possible clinical. They're scoring more goals than they should be on their XG. But more importantly, I do want to have a look at their set plays. They've been very, very good at set pieces this season. Jacobson's probably a massive do with that. Joe Jacobson, of course, their left back or left centre back, mainly at left back, left wing back, doing a fantastic job there as well. We'll look at that as well. You can see how hard they are for the XG set pieces. 9.4 set play XG. They actually scored 9 goals in set plays. They're being very, very good, very, very clinical from set plays. Wycombe have done a fantastic job as well. And finally, what I want to look at is that expected goals against. We've got to talk about Crewe. They're in a very, very worrying position. Why are Crewe struggling so much? Well, I can tell you straight away, that's a worrying place to be. 20.8 XG conceded, 19 goals conceded. That is very, very worrying. That is a very, very worrying place to be. I mean, Cambridge are in even more of a strange position. They should have conceded 12. They're conceding much more than they should be as well. But the worrying thing about Crewe is they should be apparently conceding 20.8 goals already this season. They've conceded 19. They need to shore up their defence absolutely, crucially, and massively. A little bit better at defending set pieces, but not great. Still not fantastic at all. In terms of what they're like going forward as well, because their XG, they're the bottom of that as well. They down to XG, they're expected to concede the most amount of goals and expected to score the least amount of goals as well. That is an awfully worrying place to be. Why Crewe where they are? Well, that says everything. They're not scoring goals and they're conceding too many. And that's just not from looking at it from face value. That's looking at it when delving into the stats. That is not a nice place to be at all. I want to look at something I've written down here as well. They've actually scored the second amount of shots against them as well at 174. That's exactly 80 more than the team with the least shots being Rotherham. They are having shots absolutely, plummeled at them. They are being absolutely battered with the amount of shots against them, and that'd be a massive reason why they're conceding so many goals. Like I said there about Rotherham. Rotherham have the least amount of shots against them. There's an 80 shot difference between Rotherham and Crewe. That's worrying, and that needs to be looked at from a Crewe perspective. Why Crewe where they are? Well, that just says everything. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up. I mean, it hasn't been a massively long episode of the podcast, but I want to sort of get this information across as well. And again, almost look at the data. How can we bring that into the real world of football visually as well? This is the real world of football. But you know what I'm trying to say? On the pitch. Can we sort of make links? Can we try and, really get some interesting data and put that, again, more visual and break it down as well. Hopefully I haven't complicated it too much, and hopefully I've answered some interesting questions about teams as well. Who's looking good? Who's struggling? What is going on in this unbelievable league we've got in League One only after 16 games of football? That's what I'm going to wrap it up. If you want to see more of this, you want to see me break down lots of more different scenarios across lots of different teams as well. We haven't looked at many, but I want to look at more and more as we go on. Please make sure you do that by leaving a like and showing you want to see that by leaving a like and subscribing as well. I'm going to set a little like target on this episode of the podcast as well. If you've watched this far in this episode of the podcast, I thank you so much. Can you hit that like button? Can we go and hit, let's say, 15 likes this episode of the podcast? That would be phenomenal. That would be show that you love this sort of content and you want to see more of it. Even if you don't want to see more of it, give it a like as well. Just let me know in the comments, this isn't very good. I won't be offended by it. Make sure you do that as well. Leave your comments. What did you take from this data as well? Did you find this interesting? Do let me know. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Until next time, I've been Jack. It's been the Unfound Podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Take care.